Hello, folks. This is Brett Taves, Ag and Natural Resources Agent for the Chisholm Trail District. This here is an introduction to the bucket calf project. What we hope to do is to define what a bucket calf project is. We're going to lay some groundwork for the expectations of the project. I'm going to include some helpful tools and tricks that allow you to be successful within the project. We're also going to establish some goals for your project, but I also want you to stick around because I have an activity at the end that I need your help with. So the bucket calf project really breaks down into three simple things, right? We need a calf, maybe a few tools, but most importantly, we need a child with an endless desire to care for an ornery creature. Okay, so it's a little more complicated than that, and we'll dig into that in just a minute. Now, the calf needs to be born between January 1 and May 1 of 2024. The 4-H member needs to be enrolled by the May 1st deadline and should have that calf in possession prior to that deadline as well. The calf also needs to be bottle or bucket raised for a significant amount of time. Now, some of you may have already found your calf, but in an ideal situation, you find a reliable source where that calf has received colostrum in the first 8 to 24 hours of its life. Colostrum is the mother's first milk and is very important to the health of that calf moving forward. Sometimes we may or may not know whether that calf received colostrum, but ideally, the calf received colostrum. Next, there's a number of reasons why that calf may need to be bottle or bucket raised. One condition might be that the mother was lost during the birthing process, as well as maybe that calf was a twin, or even possibly that calf's mother just wasn't a very good mother, and it's better suited for it to be raised on a bottle or bucket calf. Again, the ideal situation is that calf was raised on a bottle or bucket for a minimum of 8 weeks with milk replacer. We'll talk more about nutrition at another time. Another thing to note that the calf can be any breed or gender. That includes both dairy and beef breeds across various different colors, and as I mentioned before, can be either male or female. Some tools that we kind of think about in terms of the bucket calf project, as mentioned, is a bucket or a bottle. I was never very successful trying to raise a calf on a bucket. Some of you may get lucky, where you can just mix the milk and the calf would drink it right out of the bucket. I always had challenges with that, and as a result, I raised most of my calves on a bottle. Sometimes you might find that your calf has a hard time suckling the bottle, meaning it doesn't get its tongue wrapped around the nipple very well to create that suckling action. Some trick that I have is that using smooth peanut butter or possibly some honey and putting it on the underside of its lip. This creates a sticky texture that the calf will then want to use its tongue to remove, and as a result, when you slide that nipple in there on top of its tongue, it will begin to hopefully suck for you. Just a helpful tip. Now, ideally, we would present or showcase your calf at the county fair, and at that point, we would want your calf to be halter broke. So a halter is definitely a tool that you'll want to have. Now, that halter can be your standard rope halter. It doesn't have to be any kind of fancy halter at this point. Additionally, some tools that would be helpful would be a brush or a comb. As I mentioned before, going to the county fair, we'd like to give that calf a bath and get it presented well for you at the fair. Some additional care equipment may be needed. For example, you may need a tuber to get that calf started and get it going. We can talk more about that, like I said, in the health and nutrition portion. Additionally, there may be a need for some syringes or a balling gun, that sort of thing. But probably the very most important part is that we need a special child to take care of this calf. They need to be very dedicated because calves need to be fed at least twice a day. Sometimes they may need additional fluids in the form of electrolytes and that sort of thing. So they need to be very dedicated as well as detail oriented. This refers to trying to feed that calf at the same time every day. Additional part of being detail oriented is watching the calf's health. There are some symptoms and things that we will talk about at another time that you really need to keep a keen eye on your calf to make sure that they are healthy. And finally, this child needs to be a hardworking child that's not only dedicated and driven and detail oriented, but they're going to run into some very challenging times. As I mentioned before, it's hard to get a calf started on a bottle sometimes. And then we also get to a point where we want to get them used to a halter. And sometimes it can be really difficult to get that calf to lead. So, as I mentioned, the most important part is really a special child to take care of this project. Now that I've got you talked into the world's greatest 4-H project on the face of the earth, I'm going to bring you back down to earth, and we're going to talk about the financial obligations of the Bucket Calf Project. And quite honestly, we should have these conversations and discussions prior to even getting into the project, because I think it's very important that we know what those financial obligations are. As of current, the cattle market has been very, very good. And as a result, our calf purchase expense is going to be quite a bit higher than what we've seen in the past. And I put a $300 number on here, but quite honestly, it could be a lot more than that. So those are some things that you need to talk about and discuss as a family. Not only just the initial calf purchase price, but then we're going to add some fuel to the fire, and we're going to need to feed that calf. As I mentioned before, I'd like to see that calf on a milk replacer for at least 8 weeks. And the products that you use, the calf milk replacer, and even the feed selection in terms of a grain or hay product, feed stuff, those are going to vary. There's a lot of variances with quality and type and kind, and then the prices will fluctuate with that as well. But just as a general rule of thumb, don't be surprised if you're going to spend $3 to $5 a head a day, particularly when that calf is on milk replacer. Once you get past that 8 weeks or so, and you got that calf on some sort of starter ration, our corn prices have been a little bit more depressed here of late. And as a result, you're going to see some drop in what that is going to cost to feed that calf a day. But just as a general rule of thumb, I threw that range out there, and it's going to vary. Okay. There's nothing just in stone here, but those are some things I want you to consider. Additionally, the medications, we'd like to see that calf get vaccinated, sometimes multiple times. And some of those vaccinations can cost, $3 to upwards of $8 a head, depending upon which product you select. Once again, we can talk more about those things in calf health at another time. Additionally, when I talk about being detail oriented and keeping a close eye on that calf, we really need to monitor that calf's health, because if at any point they become dehydrated, we would need to utilize some IV fluids. That's another expense. If we had to have any kind of medications involved with a veterinarian, those expenses really start to add up, and it makes it really hard to kind of be successful financially with this project. But at any rate, we've added all these expenses up, and it's looking kind of daunting, but what are the possible outcomes of this financially? If you've got a healthy calf to sell after the fair, after your project's over, if you decide to go that route, as of current, 300-pound calves are bringing over $3 a pound right now. Now, granted, that's going through a sale barn, and 9 times out of 10, those calves, that's a group of calves. That's not an individual calf that you might be selling, or however you may market it. But the reality is that our bucket calves generally have a reduced growth curve in relation to the calves that are raised naturally on their mother. As a result, it's possible that those calves will be docked at the marketplace in terms of pricing. Um, but I'm giving you a, you know, I'm giving you a rough estimate of what those calves are selling for now. $900. Um, don't be surprised if it's less than that, but hopefully, if you were able to, put that calf in a situation with some other calves, maybe you market them with your neighbor or farmer or friend or something like that. There's that possibility. Another option is you got a healthy calf to keep, and maybe you want to show that calf as a second year bucket calf the next year at the fair. And at that point, you'd have a breeding heifer or possibly a market animal um, that you could terminally market. And like I said, right now we have $1.80 plus fat cattle. On a 13 to 1,500 pound animal, you're looking at $2,500 to $2,800 possibly, or more, depending upon how the market kind of goes over the course of the next year. But along with that, though, is added expense. Don't just think it doesn't cost us anything to go from a bucket calf at the fair to then having a big market animal to sell. And but anyways, breeding heifers, bred heifers, for example, we're seeing some numbers of 2,500 plus. I've seen some even up to $3,500 per head. I know there again, those are under more normal, natural circumstances where that heifer has been raised by its mother, with a reduced growth curve that we see in some of our bucket calves. Those calves may not, or that heifer may not reach that market point there. But at any rate, there are other options, and maybe you want to start and grow your own herd at home, and that's certainly fine. But that is one of the possible outcomes. As with any livestock project, we need to talk about the possibility that calf might not make it. Fatality, as I mentioned, the reduced growth rate, growth curve, if you will, on the bucket calf project. So we might have some calf morbidity, and those things will really certainly affect the value of that calf. So it is a real possibility anytime we have a livestock project in 4-H that we might not be successful and we might lose that calf. So we need to have a real understanding that is a possibility. But I want to end on a high note and say that this also could produce the greatest memory in your life. This is a character building experience that hopefully you can take with you the rest of your life and really build a lot of positive characteristics. It certainly did for me, and I'm grateful for it. So at any rate, these are conversations that need to be had prior to getting into the bucket calf project. So I really want to highlight that. And we can discuss more of this and further if you have any questions. Something I think is important for any 4-H project, whether it be livestock or any kind of static project, is establishing goals. Whether you've been in that project for the first time or many times, multiple years, you should always establish some goals at the beginning of your project. And one thing with the bucket calf project, I really strongly encourage you to start with the end in mind. One thing we didn't talk about earlier is if your exit strategy or your plan with that calf is to keep, let's say it's a heifer, and it happens to be a twin to a bull, chances are that's not going to be a fertile heifer. We can talk more about that kind of stuff moving forward, but you really need to have a plan as to what you're going to do with that calf in the end. And along with that is, starting with that end in mind, what do we hope to get out of this project? What do we hope to get out of this experience? Establishing those goals, and they can be quite variable, right? I mean, if the goal is just, I'd like to learn more about my calf in terms of vocabulary, terminology, parts of the calf, we're going to dive into those things, and I think that's fantastic. I encourage you to challenge yourself, make multiple goals. And along with those goals, how are we going to measure success? As part of SMART goals is it has to be measurable. How are we going to determine whether or not we were successful? An example might be that, I want to be able to identify parts of my calf with 90% accuracy, right? I mean, that's a measurable thing. You know, if we go through and identify 95% of the parts of our calf, you know, that would be a successful goal if we can hit that goal, you know. And then finally, how do we meet, you know, how do we meet that goal? What do we need to be successful? You know, and jot down some things that say, hey, you know, we're going to have some project meetings. I'm going to go over my parts of my calf, you know, once a week. I'm going to take my calf for a walk and give it a bath. You know, on the weekends, I'm going to identify the parts when I give it a bath. You know, that's just kind of some examples that you can kind of come up with. But at this point, I think it's very important to establish some goals anytime you're doing a project. And that kind of sets the foundation for what we're really doing this. You know, oftentimes we get caught into different reasons for doing things, and some may, you know, be good, some may be bad, but ultimately this is your project and you need to get the most out of it. And by establishing those goals, hopefully we are successful in doing that. Now, finally, we're going to move into our first bucket calf activity. I want you to record a short video, less than 90 seconds long, if at all possible, with your calf. Things you need to include in your video is your name, your calf's name, your calf's breed and gender, and some of you might have to do some homework to identify your calf's breed and gender, but please include that in your video. And finally, 3 goals that you have this year for your bucket calf project. An example is listed below. My name is Brett Taves. This is my calf, Roscoe. He is a Holstein steer calf. My 3 goals are, I want to learn more about my calf's breed, the Holstein. I want to know where it came from and what characteristics make up the breed. I want to learn the 4 parts of my calf's stomach. I want to take my calf to school for show and tell. It's as simple as... Now, if you don't have a calf yet, please send me a wanted advertisement. This too will also be a video. I want you to include your name and 3 goals that you have for this year's bucket calf project. It might look something like this. Hello, my name is Brett Taves. I am looking for a calf for my bucket calf project this year. My goals for this year are, I want to learn what products come from cattle besides meat. I also want to learn what feed ingredients go into my calf's diet. And finally, I want to teach my calf to lead and exhibit it at the county fair. The idea behind this wanted advertisement is if you don't have a calf located, hopefully I can take this advertisement to some of our farm friends and locate you a calf shortly. I ask that you please send all videos, both the wanted advertisement and your calf video, to taves@ksu.edu by April 15th. And as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.